We interrupt this program for a special news bulletin.
Throws toward the corner of the end zone. It is intercepted! Intercepted! The Ducks have the ball!
To the end zone! Touchdown, Oregon! Mariota dives! Touchdown! They hand it off straight out! C.J. Verdell wins the game for Oregon!
Inside the 10! A hat-trick, a touchdown from Justin Herbert! Howard's going to run for it. Time runs out, and that'll do it! Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon! They storm the field at Autzen!
All right, Duck fans, here we go. Welcome into another episode of the Ducks Rising podcast, sponsored by Backer. My name is Zachary and Neel. You know my co-host over there, the one and only Travis Rooke-Ley. Travis, what's up, man? How we doing?
Good, man. One week closer to football. Weather's nice. Gonna be a hot weekend, but excited to chat some ball.
We are so close to football. I can't believe it's like we had our last, fall camp interview session today. Now it's like, all right, we'll see you guys in game week. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's actually here. I mean, we'll be watching football this weekend. Little Farmageddon in Ireland, 9 a.m. Saturday. I'm like, do I want to take advantage of the last technically non-football weekend, or am I just sitting at home? It's a big debate.
I don't want to just sit at home. That sounds more fun.
We'll see what the significant other has to say about it.
That's a very fair point. All right, well, just a quick thank you to all you guys who support us and have supported us over the past few weeks. The reach out from the listeners has been great to see. The podcast network is growing every day, so thank you all for being a part of that. Reminder, if you have not already, for sure, go subscribe to our YouTube and give us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you happen to use. We've got great things going here at Ducks Rising, and we're offering some incredible content to our fans.
Totally. And just a reminder, this podcast is sponsored by the Ducks Rising NIL Collective. We're offering Oregon fans a unique opportunity in the ever-changing world of college football with membership options starting at just $10 a month. Unlike many collectives at other programs, Ducks Rising isn't just asking for your dollars, but we're providing actual value and content in return. So not only do your dollars support the acquisition and retention of elite athletes, you'll gain inside access to team news, recruiting and roster developments, live events, interviews with players and coaches, and more. Just this week, we completed a long interview with Kenyon Sadiq on our app for our viewers, and just getting to hear from Kenyon and what he's about and little nuggets about fall camp and day of the life of fall camp. It was just super cool to hear from him. So just support content like that, support the program, and ultimately you're helping bring a national championship to Eugene. So check out ducksrising.com.
All right, just some weekly housekeeping before we jump into the show. The Ducks Rising Film Room dropped earlier this week. Geoff Schwartz dove into Dante Moore's film from both Oregon and UCLA, gave us a look at what he does great and what he needs to improve on this year. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second because it was a really, really great episode from Geoff. If you have not yet, make sure to check out our Ducks Rising Alumni Corner. Last week, Travis and I sat down with Walter Thurman III. Earlier this week, our episode with Achilles Smith Sr. dropped. That was a fun one to do. It was much more of like a parent corner than an alumni corner because we just got to talk about what it's like for him to watch this program now through his son's eyes and through the life of a parent. So I thought that was really fun.
It was cool you could just tell how special it was to him. And I got to imagine as an alum just to see, that's probably, I know as Achilles articulated, that was his probably a little part of his dream growing up, but to see it actually come to fruition and have that connection in the program, pretty special. So definitely check that out.
Also, an update on Inside the Pocket with Joey Harrington. Joey had some scheduling stuff come up this fall that we are trying to work around and kind of make sure everything is in order for him, for us. So for this week and potentially the next couple of weeks, we won't have Joey on, but we will keep you guys posted when new developments come in. We're just trying to work out some logistics and make sure everyone's happy. As for today's show, Travis and I are going to talk a bit about fall camp and discuss Geoff Schwartz' breakdown of Dante Moore. Because that was a really good one, like I said earlier. Then we have the pleasure of talking to our good friend Tyson Alger, previously the I-5 quarter, but now starting a new venture with Lookout Eugene Springfield. We were going to get the latest from Tyson, as his job changes a little bit and get his insight on what to expect going into the season. But first, let's start with Dante Moore. Travis, what were your major takeaways from watching Geoff's breakdown?
Yeah, I mean, 40 minutes of gold. So obviously a big shout to Geoff. I think some of it we knew and some of it was just super informative. I mean, I think first things first, obviously the arm talent is something we've been talking about for a long time. And I think when people think about arm talent, they naturally think, big shots down the field. And there were certainly some of those. But I think what Geoff did a great job of pointing out was arm talent, velocity, stuff like that, that plays in every part of the field. He highlighted a specific goal line play when Dante was at UCLA where just his sheer ability to pump a ball in a tight pocket created a touchdown when a lot of quarterbacks are probably getting that ball batted down or throwing an interception. So just Geoff's expertise, his ability to talk through Dante, but at the same time, I'm learning about defenses. I'm learning about route combos. I'm learning what the offensive line should do here. Talk about getting excited and gearing up for the season. It was really special to see that, but I can't lie. I mean, you combine Will Stein and I think a situation that is a little bit better than he had at UCLA. Yeah. Safe to say. I mean, the potential's all there.
I just love it. It seems like Geoff really did his homework here because, we weren't just looking at touchdowns and interceptions. We were looking at some incompletions and stuff where it's he made an incredible throw here and the receiver just dropped it. So it's I watched Dante a little bit when he was at UCLA, but not every single play. So there was plays that I had not seen before. And it's this is really great stuff because, you don't see that in the stat sheet, but he had some really high-level throws. I also like that, it appears that some of his mistakes come earlier in games rather than later in games, and Geoff kind of broke down why that is and, what we can expect from that going forward. So all in all, just a really, really great, like you said, 40 minutes of just incredible content.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, we'd be silly to think that obviously Will Stein hasn't addressed those things and noticed some of the same tendencies that Geoff did. And I think that, you're throwing a true freshman out there with limited weapons and offense that probably doesn't fit him extremely well. Those are freshman mistakes. I mean, there's a reason that there's a name for that type of thing. So I think the thing that gives me an incredible amount of optimism is just he chose to come here and sit for a year. Mm-hmm. Learn from a guy who's done it at an elite level for a long time in Dylan. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks out there that would have done that. I mean, he probably could have just gone back home to Michigan and been their starting quarterback last year. So the maturity that shows, the belief in our system, the belief we have in him to invest in him, this staff has shown they're not willing to, unturn any stone when it comes to a quarterback position. So if they didn't feel like Dante was the guy, they're going to go find that guy. So I don't know. I think you've started to see more and more guys come out and be pretty effusive in their praise for Moore. You've seen Josh Pate this week. I know Yogi Roth was in town and said the same thing. I think the momentum's starting to build of this might not be the question mark some people are portraying it as. In reality, it could be a strength.
Well, and then we talked about it on the Ducks Rising board earlier. Look at the Beats commercial that just came out. You don't do that for someone who's in the midst of a quarterback competition with a week left in the season. I think we can say fairly confidently that he is the guy, and he's going to be a guy this year. I think, I'm just incredibly excited. I think the sky's the limit for him.
And I think it's important at the same time to show respect to what Austin Novosad has done and the maturity he's shown throughout. And I have it on pretty good authority that the staff feels like they can win 10 plus games with either one of those guys back there. I think that says a lot about Austin. So I think you're looking at a situation where he's set up pretty well for the future where, Dante has an incredible season. We accomplish incredible things. Maybe his eyes turn pro a little bit and you've got Austin waiting there. And if not, I'm sure the staff's going to do everything they can to find a home for Austin. I think he's going to be a really good player at this level.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, real quick before we get to Tyson, let's talk about fall camp. Oregon is wrapping things up and getting to game week, but what's the latest that you're hearing from fall camp?
I think some good things have been coming out about the offense. I think it definitely sounds like it was a bit of a slow start. I know we addressed it a couple weeks ago. I think that's natural in the fall. You tend to see defenses ahead of offense, but it seems like the offense has really picked things up and gotten into a rhythm lately. I think that obviously starts with Moore. The thing that gives me most optimism when it comes to that is you're not going to have success with our defensive line without our offensive line playing well. And so I think a lot of struggles at the start of last year came down to an offensive line that had some injuries, struggled to gel through those first couple of games. So if we're running the ball, moving the ball, protecting the pocket in practice against a defense that we're not going to face many like our own, I think that says good things about where the offense is at coming into the year, which is honestly my bigger question.
How much of a concern do you think there is around there's been a few notes out there about just the rushing defense and that it's, not quite up to par yet. I know we saw that last year against Penn State. We saw it obviously against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, that the rushing defense kind of struggled at times. And that seems to be kind of a small concern going into this year. Not that they can't be great again, but, what is your feeling there?
I mean, I'm sure there's some validity to it. I mean, without any of us being there every day and just, seeing little snippets or talking to different people, I think it's hard to paint a full picture. But, I mean, I hear it. You're bringing in, as much as we love this defensive line and as much as we believe in the potential, you did lose 3 NFL dudes out of 4.
Top 3 round picks, yeah.
Totally. So, there's going to be a learning curve. And so I think the unit that we see week 1 is going to be a lot different than week 12. But you have the bodies to do it. The season sets up well to do it. The playoff system now sets up well to be playing your best later in the year. We've got the bodies, we've got the dudes, we've got the developers. I think everyone here believes in, Tosh and Tony as, the coaches to get those dudes right. So I hear that, but like we talked about before, I mean, you're going against how many offensive line, tight end, running back combos are we going to go against this year that's better than our own? Yeah. I mean, not many.
Not many, for sure. Going back to the offensive side of the ball, I feel like I could ask you this question every week in fall camp, even in the season, and it could be a different answer. But if you were to predict who you think the starting wide receivers are, who do you think it'd be? Because it feels like over the last week it's kind of shifted a little bit, at least in our conversations on Ducks Rising.
Yeah, I mean, DeCorian is 1.
He's locked in, it feels.
Yep. I think after that, I see it as almost like a group of 5 between Casper, Lowe, Benson, McClellan, Gresham. Did I miss anyone?
Gary is who I thought has been.
Sorry.
The picture.
You're right. So possibly even 6.
6, yeah.
I believe all 6 of those guys we just mentioned have at least seen meaningful opportunities with the first unit. I think you're going to see a ton of rotating to start the year. I think we're going to see a ton of 12 personnel, 21 personnel. I think what we're basically going to do is see a lot of 2 wide receiver, 3 wide receiver sets and figure out who those dudes are going to be. We know DeCorian is going to be 1. I've been surprised, not that I didn't believe in him, but man, Coach Stein and Coach Laney have been effusive. It seems like, I mean, you're the one there with Bryant the last couple of days, right?
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought this up. It seems that there's just so much momentum building for his case to be in there. They're time and time again saying, yeah, he was just, he was injured last year, just couldn't really get back to full health. But when he's fully ready to go, he's really good. So I think we see him at least at the start of the year, just because he's so experienced. I think we see him in there quite a bit. I'm also super curious to see what Malik Benson does, just because, Lanning said today that he's been that deep threat. He's been able to have a lot of explosive plays this fall. So I think if I were to pick my 3, it would probably be DeCorian, Malik, and Gary right now. But again, you could have so many more options in there.
I think that's smart money, honestly. And I also think we've discussed it before, but we know how much more goes into that position under this staff than, who's the flashy guy who can, make the flashiest plays down the field, who can stretch the field. There's a lot more that goes into it. And so I think a guy like Bryant, I think clearly what he's displayed is knows the playbook, dependable, willing to block. I mean, he was the 4th guy on a really good core a couple of years ago and made some big plays. I mean, I still remember the play at Arizona State, long touchdown. So it's not a lack of talent on that guy. That's the one piece that I think when it comes down to your projected 3, I think there's a lot of Duck fans in the, sphere right now that are thinking, man, we can't do better than, Gary Bryant and Malik Benson. I'm thinking, well, Gary Bryant's a top 50 recruit who's, made plays at USC and Oregon on the biggest stage. And Malik Benson's #1 JUCO in the country who has every skill in the world. So it's not like we're running out guys from 2010 at receiver that we had there. Like, these guys are still elite recruits and elite athletes.
Well, it's like, I would love to go into a year where you have your ceiling with Zachary Moore and everything he can be. You also need your floor. And, like, that floor with Gary is, I think, pretty high, too. Like, he's a very reliable piece, and you can depend on him and trust that he's going to... They say that he's the most consistent guy on the team and just brings the same thing every day. They know exactly what they're going to get. So I think that's a really good spot to be at when you have a young, unproven room.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what gives, just one last note on that, I think what should give Duck fans like comfort there is Coach Douglas is a really good coach. You don't get hired by Bill Belichick if you don't know how to coach. So that dude knows how to coach. And like we talked about earlier, we're so deep and I would argue proven at running back, at tight end, and along the offensive line that you've got a little bit of time. You figure out who those three are going to be. You can withstand an injury or two at that position if it were to happen, like it's already happened with Stewart. But that's not like the driver of the offense this year is the receivers. That's just not where the room is at, and that's fine. It's going to be down the line with who's being brought in, but you have those other positions to lean on, especially early in the year.
Tell me a little bit about Brandon Finney, because he's been getting a lot of buzz this past week.
Boy, I mean, I just think that I keep thinking back to his recruitment because there was, I mean, first of all, it popped out of nowhere. So it's a pleasant little surprise, you know, top 200 guy. Wow. You know, kind of a freaky athlete, but a little bit raw. Then we go into the fall, and I remember for a solid month there, all of us are just expecting, like, when's he flipping to Penn State? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So first of all, like, that is a huge win when you're thinking about a conference rival and a true, like, blue blood rival that you're going to be competing against. I mean, just as he's going to see the field here, he would have been seeing the field there for another top 5 team. We've mentioned it here, but it sounds like the staff is just doing whatever they can to get him on the field. And if that means some reps at star, that means reps at star. I'm not sure how many times I've seen a guy with his like height and athleticism in the slot primarily, but he is built. I mean, you've seen some of the pictures coming out of fall camp. What that tells me is that the staff just needs to get him on the field and believes he needs to be on the field. And he's one of the best dudes out there. And that just gets me fired up.
Yeah, it sounds like we're hearing similar things about both Finney and Naeem Alford, where it's just like, we don't know where they need to go, but they need to go somewhere because these guys are super special. They just need playing time. We need to get them out there. And to be saying that about 2 true freshmen, it's like, yeah, I think that Oregon is in such a good spot at this position going forward.
The threesome between those two and then Trey McNutt, who was all set to play and hopefully will later in the year, mind you, another 5-star in Dorian Brew, that's going to go down as a true all-timer. I mean, I mentioned it yesterday on the board, but I think we naturally have some questions this year about how that room's going to shake out. I think this is going to be the last year that we remember in a long time where there is any question about the DB room.
Yeah, I think, and then you look at what they're doing the 2026 class too. Like, yeah, it's just stacking classes on top of classes. It's like what Georgia used to do, so it makes sense. Let's wrap up fall camp talk for the day and get into our interview with Tyson. Before we do that, though, Travis, can you tell me a bit about Backer?
Yep. This podcast is sponsored by Backer. Backer is a new outerwear company founded by an Oregon alum, combining high-performance materials from the outdoor industry with a sleek Oregon look. As someone who grew up in Eugene, I know the value of high-end apparel on football Saturdays, summer hikes, and winter trips to the mountains. This gear checks every box. We encourage all Duck fans to check out their amazing Oregon jackets, hoodies, hats, and more at Backer. That's BCKR.com. Use the code RISINGFREE for free expedited shipping, and 10% of all orders will go back to Ducks Rising. Check out Backer today.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to bring on one of my fellow Oregon Ducks beat reporters, one of the best writers in the business, if I say so myself, Tyson Alger. Tyson, how you doing today?
That's awfully kind, Zach. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. You've got a lot new going into this year. It's kind of like the Oregon Ducks, actually. A lot new going into this year. The past several years, you kind of branched out on your own with the I-5 corridor, telling some fascinating stories in Oregon. Now, though, you're onto something new, working with Lookout Eugene Springfield. Can you tell me a little bit more about this new venture and what led to it?
Yeah, it's It's kind of happened quickly, and so I'm still kind of getting my feet on the ground here. It was just a few weeks ago. I was in Vegas for Big Ten Media Days, and I was there for the corridor and putting together a list of stories that I was getting ready to tell for the season. And then I got a call from the folks at Lookout, and the more we started talking, the more I kind of just felt that like our kind of goals and priorities were aligned. Part of why I started the corridor 4 years ago is I thought there were a lot of really good Oregon related stories that were just kind of being undertold in this market. And I thought that there was still an appetite for that. There's never a lack of material too in this state. And so, it was kind of a weird 4 years being independent. There are a bajillion people I'd like to thank for the support, not only for reading me, but for, just even like allowing me to keep covering the teams that I've been keep covering. But as you guys know, Oregon's in a different stratosphere right now, even from the time when I covered the beat. And it often felt like I was kind of trying to cover that team with one arm tied behind my back, because I just didn't have a ton in the way of expenses or like editors or people to bounce things off of. So the more I got talking with Lookout Eugene Springfield, and the more that they kind of expressed that they really love my work and want me to keep kind of going about it in the way that I've been doing it felt like a good fit. So it's a bit of a change. I've yet to screw up saying like who I worked for in a press conference scenario yet. I do need to get some Lookout merch, because I'm still rocking all the corridor stuff. But we hit the ground running last week and got a couple stories out there, and we're still here. And that's kind of the blessing I have, is this is an industry where not everybody who wants to still be here is able to still be here. So I'm very very thankful that I still have the opportunity to be doing this.
Tyson, I've been a fan of yours for a while, all the way back to the Athletics. So just grateful for having you on. And how do you feel like this gig is going to change the way like you cover Oregon? I know you mentioned expenses and stuff like that, but do you feel like your day to day is going to be much different?
A little bit, because I mean, like my thing with the corridor was I never set out for the corridor to be like a directly University of Oregon thing. So I kind of had a lot of I had my fingers in a lot of different pots around the state, and while I enjoyed that variety, and I think it led to some cool and interesting stories, I didn't quite dive into Oregon like maybe I had at the Athletic or the Oregonian previously. So with this job, I'm 100% Oregon, and one of the things that I'm excited about with that is it's not just football, but they're going to want me to be covering all sports. And so, there are definitely some stories out there from maybe even some like non-revenue sports that maybe my audience wasn't so interested in before, but now we're focused on Eugene, we're focused on the community, we're focused on the University of Oregon, and I'm really excited to kind of start looking under some rocks that I've kind of traditionally been walking past in my prior jobs.
I know there are probably a lot of answers to this question, but I'll simply ask, what are you the most proud of during your time with the corridor?
I think I grew my audience with the corridor even from when I was at the Athletic. It was pretty daunting, like leaving a company that was flaunting like how much money that they were investing into everything, and starting from scratch and starting from like a subscriber list of zero. I remember sending out my first story, like my first email, and being like, God, I hope somebody reads this. And so obviously like growing the subscriber base was very important for me, like financially, and to be able to support myself. But every single time like somebody subscribed, like you'd get their name, and sometimes there would be a message of like, hey, I've followed you from the Oregonian to the Athletic to here. And just being able to like keep kind of that base and some of those familiar names, and just kind of people that I've been able to consistently share these stories with, like that was really cool. The other thing's a little bit more selfish. I've been doing a lot of soccer coverage on the corridor, and that's kind of like a weird blend when you're like covering like college football, and then the other thing you have is like soccer. Like I don't know how much those audiences align, but I got a lot of emails from people that were like, "Dang it, Tyson! Like I'm not a big soccer fan, but like you've made me follow the Timbers this year because you've presented it in an interesting way." And that's like a fun little pat on like the shoulder for me, just because my goal was always just to tell interesting stories, no matter like what the topic is. And after covering college football for as long as I have, like soccer was kind of an eye-opening and very different experience for me. And so it was really fun to do the last 2 years.
And you got to tell the story of the wiffle ball tournament in Oregon.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite things that you, because I actually know a few people who play in that tournament. So when I saw you write that, I was like, this is amazing.
When I came across that story, I think I learned about it in like December, and like I started reaching out, and the guy who owns the field's like, hey, like come out in May, like it'll be like the story will be better in May. And it was so hard to sit on that, guys, just because it was like this majestic wiffle ball field that has like an amazing story behind it too. But thankfully, like, you know, with Lookout, I am like the University of Oregon reporter, but like I can also cover like larger events in Lane County and in the Eugene Springfield area. So hopefully I can still kind of branch out and cover some of those things from time to time.
I hope so.
Well, as someone who, you know, Zach and I both growing up in Eugene, and I feel like, you know, a staple of my childhood was just like the guards coverage. And that was always a super big piece of Eugene. So I think I've talked to so many people who live down there now who are just like super excited about the Lookout and your guys' future and the work that you guys are doing. So really excited about that for one. I know your first piece, I think, was about Bryce Betcher. So I just want to give him a little bit of a shout. He's been a Ducks Rising guy since the start, and I feel like he's just like epitomizes everything we love about Oregon. So just like give listeners a look into that first piece you wrote and just like a snapshot into, you know, what you were working on.
Yeah, so they wanted me to write like an introductory column, which like they're pretty formulaic, and I've done enough of those over the years, and people have followed me from place to place that I was like, let's hit the ground running. Like let's take advantage of this opportunity. And that just kind of reminded me of like this conversation I had with Bryce at Big Ten Media Day. You know, I haven't really come across an athlete, at least here at Oregon, that like maybe other than Devin Allen, when you think about like somebody who had such a clearly defined path towards one sport. You know, Bryce came to Oregon, I believe, as like a 190-pound center fielder. Baseball was going to be his thing. He got better and better each year at baseball, and the pros agreed. I mean, a 13th round draft pick, a guy who's a stellar fielder. He's got speed. He's got an emerging power profile. Like Bryce probably has a comfortable future in baseball if he wants it. But, you know, it was fascinating talking to him, and he's like, I love baseball. Baseball's been my thing, but the thing I love about football is no matter how much effort you put into it, like you get that out. Baseball, there's a lot of luck. You know, the best hitters in the world get a hit 3 out of every 10 times. But in football, if you chase down that guy, if you go hit that guy, if you put in more effort, generally that's rewarded. And there's been nobody that's put in more effort than Bryce Betcher at Oregon over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, think about the talent that's out of Oregon now and the depth and how much harder it is for a walk-on from Eugene to like make an impact on this type of roster. For him to kind of climb that ladder into a spot where he was not only a good player, but a dominating player last year. And so like when this opportunity presented itself, he's like, I want to take advantage of it. I want to go all in. And because I like trying to like tie things around in my stories, I tried to parallel that to me looking at this opportunity to cover Oregon at this time in its history. And I was like, I'm ready to go all in too. So that was my first piece on Bryce. And I find him to just be a fascinating player. He's a great interview. He looked good in his tux at Media Day, or in his suit at Media Day. You know, it's Oregon, because of the profile that it's in right now, it feels like we're shifting away from some of like the certain underdog stories. You know, you can look at their roster. It's players coming from all over the country, but Eugene is still a community that still fully embraces like the local guy, like the local Duck, and the guy who has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And who better to represent that than Bryce Betcher?
Well, and Travis and I are both the South Eugene alum, so we like Bryce a little bit more just because of that. So I thought it was a really cool story. Let's talk about the Ducks going into 2025. There's obviously a ton new, and seeing as you just wrote about the quarterback situation earlier today, I'll take that off of the board as an answer here, but what has you kind of the most intrigued going into this season?
Oh man, there's a few things. I want to know who we're talking about in 4 weeks when it comes to like who's like the standout pass catcher. I mean, like there's a lot of candidates there. I know the worry has kind of like been around like who's not going to be there at the start of the season, but This isn't like 10 years ago where if you lose like a 4-star or a 5-star, like then you're looking at pretty lower levels of talent beneath it. Like Oregon's been recruiting very well, very good at that position. There's a lot of unproven guys. I also just kind of want to see what Dacorian Moore does. I mean, like that kid, everything's pointing towards that kid being phenomenal. So I'm excited about that. I think Oregon's offensive line is going to be amazing this year. At media day, I've seen a lot of like big dudes at Oregon. Like I haven't seen a profile quite like Isaiah World before. We've seen like 6'6" guys who are like 360 pounds or like that sort of thing. But World's 6'8". I think he's 310, but it's like a chiseled 310. He kind of looks like if like Zion got in shape, if you will. So I'm just really looking forward to like a dominating, consistent offensive line, because that was something that kind of was a bit of a process last year before they really got to where they wanted to go. I think the front seven is going to be pretty electric. I mean, like you look at some of those dudes up front between like Amari Washington and Bear Alexander, and then you got Mateo coming off the edge. Yeah, like that excites me too. The secondary and just like the general size of all those dudes is fascinating to me too. Like we're used to seeing like 5'8" to 5'10" sort of cornerbacks out there, and we could be potentially looking at like a starting pair for the Ducks this year where both guys are above 6 foot and 6'1". We're definitely in the era of like those types of athletes now at Oregon. When Cristobal got here, he talked about like this is going to be a work in progress. This is a transition. Like we have to start building up the cupboards of athletes, and obviously Dan Lanning has taken that to a completely different level. But like we're there now. Like this is a roster that is completely equipped to contend year in and year out at the levels that they want to. What makes this year fun is just a lot of new faces, and we don't quite know where those stories are going to go. You can look at last year. You kind of had a base level for the expectation because you had Dylan Gabriel coming in at quarterback, and that's kind of a all or nothing type of season. I think this year's Oregon team could have just as good or a higher of a ceiling, but it's just they're gonna have to learn some lessons on the way, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun to cover.
So I've got to ask you a question about like expectations, and you mentioned last year. It's a question I've been reconciling with a lot in my head, but how do you view last season as someone that covers Oregon, and what have you noticed the kind of vibe tenor to be around the program when it comes to how they're using that going into this year?
Yeah, in hindsight, if you go back, like I think like the headline of my story in the immediacy of the Rose Bowl was, I think the headline was like, was this worth it? And you're coming off of like such an emotional game. After a very emotional season. Like Oregon achieved highs that it had only done once or twice in program history before. Last season, it was a dominating year. They won the Big Ten title. They won the biggest home game in program history. Those were all real things. And it was just shocking the way that it ended in the Rose Bowl. But now that like a little bit of time has passed, and you're able to remember the other moments around it, like some of the ones that I just mentioned. And there's far more than that too. Like I think it was an incredibly successful season. I think it was very disappointing the way it ended, and it's Oregon fans are kind of used to ending the year on a bit of a high note. That certainly wasn't one of those, but I think it further validated what like Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy and Will Stein are doing and standing for as a coaching staff. The fact that they've had so much continuity from that staff moving into this next year too, where there has been a lot of changeover of roster, but you do have a lot of those same voices coaching those players. I think last year was a huge success, and I think this year is a fascinating one for Dan and the staff, because I don't think they have quite as much pressure to go undefeated and win a natty this year, because there's a lot more X factors around. But I do think like this is like the first real proof of concept of what an entire like Dan Lanning team should look like, because you do have you have the development, and I know there are transfers that have come in, but it's kind of like garnish to an overall roster that has had 3 to 4 really good recruiting classes in a row and players that have developed in that. So I think we are getting to the points where Oregon is a much more complete team. I think they're a lot more like self-sustaining. Like, I understand Dante came from the portal last year, but he's the guy that's been in the system this year, and they're able to promote from within. So, like Oregon's in a very intriguing spot because I do think they might take a couple lumps this year. There might be some growing pains, but as we learned last year, it matters a whole lot more how you're playing at the end of the season than you are at the start. And I think the base level of talent the Ducks have means that they're still going to be pretty good as they're learning those lessons.
One of the favorite things that, we've done, you and me together in my career at least, is the draft that we had last year where we picked the stories that we wanted to write going into the year. I don't know if anyone thought that was interesting, but I found it fascinating and
Hey, I liked
fun
it.
exercise. Yeah, it was fun. So I don't know if you can divulge this just yet, but what story is there out there that you can't wait to tell? Do you have that in your mind where it's like, I can't wait to talk to this person or just kind of chase this idea this year?
Man, that's put me on the spot.
I know.
I'm excited to write the story of, Kenyon Sadiq went from being a player that Oregon player or people in Oregon knew last year to suddenly being on national highlight packages because of the Penn State hurdle. But I think that this is going to be the year where it's just week in and week out, you're going to be getting Kenyon Sadiq highlights across the country. And I always do find it's interesting to watch an athlete's profile go from being not an anonymous guy, but a guy that's just kind of a guy here and then becoming kind of a national figure. So I think that could be a really interesting year with Kenyon just because he's got the talent and the drive and the personality to do all those things. And I think he's got a really great NFL future in front of him too. I'd like to do something on Wilson Love at some point just because in the previous administration, they had a strength coach that you heard from every second of every day of every practice. And then when you went online, he was online all the time too. So there weren't a whole lot of mysteries about the last guy. Wilson Love, while he's been, he's been featured in the UO in-house productions, he's definitely more of a do your work and keep your head down sort of guy. But players swear by him, and anytime you're talking to somebody about either bulking up or slimming down or becoming a better athlete for the position they're playing, everyone swears by that dude. And I don't really know much about him. And so I think that might be a fun one for me to explore here as the season gets going.
So Tyson, back to expectations, just kind of wrapping it up. What's, to you, we're sitting here in January, what's a successful season for Oregon and what are your expectations going into it?
How many games are there in a year these days? 12? Yeah.
12 to what, 17?
Maybe 17, yeah.
I think, success is such a hard thing to determine in this era of Oregon. Because you could say, I could sit here and say 9 wins, and there are people that be oh, that's kind of disappointing, for the level of talent that Oregon is. I think, I think 10 wins and at least being in the, I think Oregon should be a playoff team. I don't think that we're in an era anymore where the Ducks have to peak every year to just have a chance to be included. Obviously there's 12 teams now, so the degree of difficulty is a little bit easier to get in, but I think Oregon can year in and year out be a top 12 program in the country. So I don't want to sit here and say, with a quarterback who has 5 career starts that it should be playoffs or bust, but I think those are the types of players that Oregon recruits, and those are the types of expectations of the players that Oregon recruits. So I don't really want to sit here and put a ceiling on top of it. I've covered a lot of seasons, though, and know how quickly things can go wrong or if a key player gets hurt. And there's just not a lot of proven depth on this roster. So, I think you could have some variables. You could have maybe as low of an 8 if things don't go well. Again, that would be if things don't go well. Which is crazy if you're talking about a team where it's everything hit the fan and you still win 8 games. But I'm fairly comfortable thinking that they're going to be in the 10-win range, and if things go well, I think they could get to 11 too. It's not the same schedule as it was last year, and I think that's a good thing for the Ducks.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's get out of here on that. Tyson, we really appreciate you taking some time for us today. Once again, congratulations on the new gig. Go ahead and tell everyone how they can best support you with Lookout Eugene Springfield for the upcoming season.
Yeah, if you just want to come check us out. We're a new site. We launched in April. I understand it takes a little bit of time to get that muscle memory and getting used to where someone's at, but it's lookouteugene-springfield.com, and right now I'm under the sports tab, but very, very soon I think there's going to be kind of like a breakout page for my Ducks content. So I get to like really flash my ego in front of everybody by saying I still have my own page. So
I love it. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate the time.
yeah, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyson.
All right, once again, we are going to close out the show and take some questions from our Ducks Rising subscribers on the Autzen Airwaves. If you are a subscriber on Ducks Rising, we asked you to write in with a testimonial about why you love being a member and a question for us to answer. Travis, what did we get this week?
Let's do it. Appreciate all the questions that came in from our Ducks Rising subscribers. Grateful for y'all. We will start with a question here from Alex. One thing that I really love about Ducks Rising is the amount of expertise that's in our community. I always find that when I log in, there are people having real football discussions, and I usually learn something unexpected. Can't wait for the season to start. Question, I'm curious what you guys think about the matchups this year as we get a better understanding of the Oregon roster. What teams outside of Penn State do you think will really test us, and maybe what position groups specifically?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but one thing, just because of how last season ended, and just because we don't know about the defensive line, like, how good they're going to be. We think they're going to be good, but I'm just curious about how this rushing defense is. I think it should be fine, against a majority of the teams. But when you go up against Penn State, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, those are two of the best backs in the nation. That's going to be a lot to slow down. And then games against, Iowa on the road, Washington on the road. That's one thing that I'm at least aware of going into the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that it's at Autzen, so I feel confident. But I think I really respect the job Cignetti does at Indiana. And I think they did a good job retaining some of their guys. And I honestly think Mendoza is going to be an upgrade. That's one where I just think about, I'm almost more nervous about that game if we beat Penn State.
Yeah, right.
You have a bye week after, coming off a huge high. I think they do some things offensively that are good. So that's one out there that I think is a natural, little bit of uneasiness coming off of it, whether it's win or lose. You're coming off a tough loss, then you're having to rebound. So certainly one I have circled, but I think really the season, like you mentioned, comes down to those three marquee road games, which I know we got a question on later: Iowa, Washington, Penn State.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, next question from Cloud. I've been with Ducks Rising for a while now, and I couldn't be more excited for the growth. The ability to affect the trajectory of our team, even in a small way, makes me feel more connected to the team I cheer for every day. The idea that more and more fans come every day brings pride for our fan base, excited for what's to come. I am curious hearing from the kids when they describe their decision-making process when they commit to Oregon. Can you talk about some of the stories of recruits that ended up flipping to Oregon or vice versa, maybe some unheard stories?
I was thinking about this earlier. When I think of flips, just the one that always comes to my mind is Nick Harbor and everything that went down with that. I know there's more positive stories out there about people who flipped to Oregon, but that was such a drama-filled 12 hours on signing day with Harbor. The fact that he ended up going to South Carolina is still painful watching what he's doing, but you've probably got better stories than I do on this one.
Well, I'm curious what you remember exactly about that. So I remember I was out of town at the time, so I couldn't follow it exactly. But I just remember going into it, and the reason I wasn't really following it closely because I heard that he had worked out a whole side deal with Phil, and it was all buttoned up. There was this track piece. I honestly wasn't even worrying. I was like, sweet, got him in the boat, all ready to roll.
He had a shoe deal made and designed for him and was locked in. And then I just remember that night laying in bed late, and my wife was she's like, "What are you doing on your phone?" I was like, I had to explain to her what crystal balls were and why it was so important, and then it kept flipping. I was like, this, the fact that this is my job is just insane, and this is what I'm worried about at 1 a.m. But the fact that we woke up in the morning and it kind of had flipped back it was crazy.
Yep. I feel like naturally the ones like that we lose stand out in my mind more. I obviously remember the Peyton Bowen a couple years ago craziness with his mom. Always seems to be a little family pull that these ones we're losing out on. I mean, a couple old shouts. I remember, was it back in the Rivals day or I don't remember. I mean, the DeAnthony one always stands out big time in my mind. And I was in college in LA at the time. So, I was surrounded by a bunch of USC guys. naturally Oregon really hadn't quite
Yeah.
got to the top yet. And so that was obviously just a huge one. And that was, I don't think Twitter was quite had come of age then, still kind of under the radar, but the whispers were starting. And then on the other side of that, I remember the Juju Smith-Schuster one.
Yeah.
Totally. I think he was back when he went by John Smith, or at least Juju, or at least just Juju Smith. I just remember him being, once again, like Harbor, like signed, sealed, we're good. You get to those last 24 hours, an LA boy, and something tends to happen.
Very side note, that's more of just like with us, not for our listeners. You know that Juju is engaged to someone who went to South Eugene with me?
Huh. All right. No idea.
Good for her. Yeah.
I love it.
Shout out to Laura.
Sounds like he should have gone to Oregon.
Yeah, I think that would have been the right call.
Okay. All right. Let's get to our next one from Nate. I initially joined Ducks Rising because I want to see Oregon win a national championship, and if I can play even a small part in making that happen, it'll make it that much sweeter. What I've grown to love about the community is it's full of the most passionate and knowledgeable Duck fans around. The people here are true diehards and simply enjoy talking ball and recruiting. Question, have your expectations of any players or position groups changed based on what you're hearing from fall camp? If so, who and how?
I mean, very easy answer is just the true freshman defensive backs. Like, I expect them to maybe play a little bit, but if we're talking about like, oh, these guys might be starting week 1 and like the staff has to get them on the field, yeah, expectations changed. I would also say I expect more from the tight end 2 and tight end 3 than I thought I would going into the year. It seemed originally like, oh yeah, they'd have Kenyon Sadiq and they'd be set, but it's like, no, they've also got Jamari. They've also got Roger. Like, this is a true, like, 3-headed group. I think I've got higher expectations for them now than I used to.
Yeah, I mean, as I think in April when I checked in with staff, I was like, my first question was, hey, are we getting another portal tight end? Like, what's going on here? That room, is Roger coming back? And they were like, no, Roger's going to be good. It's crazy how we've gone from me wondering about that to that room in such good health. I'm with you on the DBs. I mean, I think, you got to feel for a guy like Theron Johnson. I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out, but I don't think he quite knew probably what he was getting into when it comes to that room. It's wild that you can bring in an all Big Ten second team cornerback and he's not even a sure thing to start, let alone like contribute big minutes early on in the year. I think that says so much about where that room is at. One I wanted to shout that we just haven't talked a whole lot about is the future offensive line. I feel a lot better about than I have in years past. I think that position, we've struggled with, some recruiting wins there. That room's, I don't think, in the exact place that Dan and Marshall would probably have it if they could have their, pick of the litter. But I've heard great things about all the freshman linemen. I think specifically Utu and Addison have made like big time waves. And I think those are going to be guys that are in the mix next year. But most importantly, like there's real depth across the entire offensive line now. And man, there were a lot of days last year where I was watching Josh Connerly and Cornelius, in the middle of the fourth quarter, like, why are these guys out here? Get them out of the game. Just worried about our depth, both interior and on the outside. But I think that the room right now is in the best place it's been in a while.
Yeah, it's such a fun era to be in. Like, I'm almost as excited to see the backups as I am to see the starters, just because we know that the future is so bright with them.
I mentioned her earlier, but my significant other isn't going to love that. But I'm planning every no leaving early this year. I'm like, no. I don't care if Montana State's 62-3 middle of the fourth. I'm like, I got to watch these third stringers. Yeah. I'll say it's part of my job on the podcast. So maybe that'll work.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right, last one from Ty. Ducks Rising has been the best mix of vetted inside info, ball talk, and player engagement of anything out there, and the proceeds generated are going directly back to the program to help our team succeed. Ducks Rising continues to grow and add even more inside voices, and knowledge and coverage is expanding, noticeably in other sports like men's basketball. Question, are there any teams on our schedule or road trips that the coaches are circling that could be harder than they expected? Everyone knows the whiteout at Penn State. At Iowa scares me. Weird stuff happens there.
I mean, those plus the Washington game, for sure, are the 3 road games that you're worried about. This team goes to Rutgers, don't they?
Yep.
That's like I'm not worried about it. I'm not concerned about it, but like that's a long trip. You kind of just get concerned about the travel a little bit or aware of it. But other than that, the road games outside of those three, I think, are pretty manageable.
Yeah, I mean, call me a degenerate or whatever other word there is out there, but I'm going to be nervous about the Rutgers game. That's just the nature of how I view these things. And you've just seen too many teams sleep through a game there. Even Northwestern, like I'm not expecting that game to be close, but you've seen a lot of really good Ohio State teams, Penn State teams, Michigan teams, go play a sleepy 9 a.m. game there, and suddenly it's, 10-3 and almost halftime. So the thing that we got to believe in is, like, Dan's lost probably, I guess we could say, one game to an inferior opponent in his time here, and that was the Oregon State debacle in 23 that we should never talk about again. So he's displayed the big difference I've noticed between Dan and Mario is, like, Dan's displayed an ability to get these guys up no matter the opponent, take care of business, put games away when you need to. So I'm not as worried about those other games, but yeah, I mean, like you said, that Iowa game, I'm never going to be feeling good about a trip to Iowa. I mean, the best Ohio State teams have lost there. Some of these other teams lost there. Good environment. I think their quarterback's going to be a lot better than anyone they've had recently. So, see how it shakes out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Iowa might be like decent this year if Mark Gronowski can actually be who he was at the FCS level. Obviously, that's a giant ask, but they turned things around offensively a little bit last year, and if they can continue to do that with the defense that Kirk Ferentz always rolls out there, it could be something special.
I mean, you saw it. Teams are playing on the road. The Big Ten is tough. I mean, the Wisconsin game last year, if they had a half-decent quarterback, we're maybe losing that game, or at least it's even tighter than it already was. I mean, that guy was not great. And so anytime you're going on the road like we are to Penn State, Washington, and Iowa, who all have, I would argue, at least above average quarterbacks and good, legit environments, as much as it pains me to say, I mean, you're in for battles. Thankfully, the system, gives you at least a mulligan this year, probably honestly two. So makes me feel a little better when I'm thinking about the stress of those games.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, let's wrap it up there. Just another reminder, if you're listening to this, check out Geoff Schwartz' Ducks Rising Film Room, which dropped earlier this week. Also, check out the Ducks Rising Alumni Corner with Achilles Smith, which dropped a couple days ago. Again, while this podcast and these separate videos are free right now, once conference play begins in week 3 of the season, those videos are going to be for subscribers only. If you are not hooked up with Ducks Rising just yet, now is the time. Head over to ducksrising.com and sign up. Remember that 97% of all proceeds are going back to the athlete in the form of NIL, so it truly is your best way to help contribute to the team and help Dan Lanning bring a championship to Eugene. Our plan is to be back on next week. Once again, it's our first game week of the year. This will be exciting. We will have videos with Geoff and the Alumni Corner coming out as well. Travis, you got anything else to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, just want to give a quick shout to our community. I know some of the users mentioned it, but man, the ball talk in there recently, just breaking down the season. Think of it as to me, it's like my Ducks group chats on my phone, but with just other diehards out there in bigger groups and people bringing in different information who are connected to different things, new perspectives. It's just been really fun lately. The positivity, the just legit what we're excited about Oregon, what we see from them, breaking down Geoff, all that stuff. It's just been a really special community to be a part of and see grow. And like we've said recently, memberships as low as $10 a month. Eat in one night, try us out for a month. You won't regret it.
Well, it's really smart talk, but it's not exclusive. You can be as smart as you want in football and actually really get into the X's and O's, and people will be there for that conversation. But you can also have questions about things and just want to understand more, and people are happy to help out and just help teach you. So I've been really impressed with just the conversations about it. I've learned some stuff about football just reading stuff in there. So shout out to that community for sure.
100% grateful for y'all for taking a chance on us and growing every day, and just know you're doing your part. From Zach and I, we're grateful. Staff is grateful. Your money's going to a good spot, and hopefully your experience has been good.
Check us out on YouTube. You can find the Ducks Rising podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you'd be so kind, again, give us a rating and review. That really helps us build this thing. You can follow me on social media at Zachary C. Neel. You can follow Travis at Travis Rooke-Ley. But most importantly, go over to Lockerverse and check out Ducks Rising. Subscribe now. Support the program. Let's rise together. We'll see you guys next week.